Hello, everybody. Welcome into our next episode in the series of pre-draft content we'll get into. And this one gonna be a more all-encompassing video, as I have mostly solidified my top 150 or so. I'll get to 200. I haven't really ordered those 50 to 200 guys yet, and I'll do some tinkering here and there. So maybe not quite a full final big board, but pretty close to. And obviously, I mean, you guys know me. I'm a very vibes drafter, and I've done a couple here that even go against the big board just because I felt the fit was great or however I felt going into it. So obviously, I don't have too much more to say. I'm going to be doing a what I would do mock draft because let's face it, you guys can't even predict you. How can I predict you? I see I left the first position up, but I don't think there's any controversy there. But it's okay. So I can't word it one, but it's what I would do here. And I guess we started Cam quarterback one. We talked about him in the quarterback show with Vic. I don't have too much more to say other than what I said there. I just think he is comfortably a potential franchise quarterback, and I think you don't move to one unless you are doing that. And I agree with the move for Cleveland to move up. And then I, in turn, agree that you should take Cam Ward there. But yeah, what I would do, it's being hard for some of you guys. Some of you guys have too many picks and too little needs. So it'd be very hard and just start swinging on an upside and leave some weird roster cuts, I would say, on the back end. But I don't have to deal with roster cuts. I just draft. So I guess I don't have to deal with that. But anyway, so Cam Ward at one to Cleveland, quarterback of the future, clean cut, and we'll see what they can do the rest of the way to build up the rest of the roster. For Green Bay, I think their choice is also very easy. I would go with Travis Hunter, the corner slash wide receiver utility player out of Colorado. I think he'd be the top corner and the top receiver in the class, and they could use either of those. I think he's a corner. I hope he's a corner. I think he's a really awesome kick-ass corner who then comes in and plays some wide receiver snaps. But that being said, at the very least, they're getting a great player on one of those spots, and they will feel very happy about that. Run that to the bank. Then for Seattle here, they obviously have been very vocal on wanting Hunter, but with him not here, I think that they just take best player available in Abdul Carter. They have Dallas Turner and Jared Verse there. So obviously for this season, I mean, still stacked. Turner, we still feel very good about working out. He just, had a little bit of an adjustment period to the league. I mean, that's very common. These guys are not busts off of 1 year, but even still, you get the opportunity to add a player of Abdul Carter's talent level, as well as both him and Turner having experience playing off ball. They could do a sort of overhang 4-3 sort of look, or play just him as a blitzing Sam, which is where I project that Carter will start at. Potentially doing some NASCAR package stuff with Verse moving in on your nickel packages, but regardless, you take the talent, you bet on the talent, and you make it work on the back end of it. And I think that they will do so. And Carter, I mean, he is a blue chip guy, top three in the class. Think I'd have him at number two currently, and I think that's probably where he will stay. Obviously, there is one more guy who's very good at his position too. But for the Jacksonville Jaguars, next up, they're going to take him, Ashton Jeanty. The Jags, they are a weird roster in a weird spot. They just bring in Geno Smith, so they're thinking, okay, we've got to build this team up to compete. We're not paying a quarterback huge money, but that's certainly a window that you're looking at, and the South is pretty open. So you think to yourselves, okay, what can I do to get myself in a good spot? Because their offensive line isn't terrible; it's not going to dominate. So if I have an offensive line that's solid but not going to dominate, I want a running back that's going to dominate, and that is Ashton Jeanty. He is going to feast in this division, probably put up 200 yards a game on these people, and that's going to be good enough to win games, and they could win the division if they can get Jeanty to have the kind of season that I think he can have. So that's the X factor for their team now, and I think that I would love to bet on Ashton Jeanty being my X factor. So to me, there was not much choice here. This is the top four players in the class going top four, and that is something that specifically this year I wouldn't overthink. I would just do it, and I would figure out the rest later. For the New England Patriots, I had them go with Shador Sanders. Now, we don't know what New England's going to do, right? We just don't know. But for my money, I think that they're going to have to figure out quarterback. I think that the roster is starting to shape up. It's starting to get there. They've got some young pieces that have hit, some young pieces that are, I think, going to hit. And it's to the point now where you cannot leave this on having no quarterback and hoping that you're bad again next year. So for my money, I would roll the dice on Shadur Sanders. I don't have him graded this high, but that's kind of the quarterback tax you pay, right? If I am in New England's shoes, I think there's a very real chance that if I wanted to move up from the beginning of round two, for instance, and get into the end of the first, I I think I would have to get to the 20, right? Because if you think Tampa and Washington pass on him here, which it does seem like the tea leaves are saying, then you get down here, you've got Tampa again at 22, and you got Tampa again at 26, and they've said they don't want to do it, and Washington at 30. So they've said they don't want to do it, but it's smokescreen season. So I cannot risk that for my franchise quarterback. I would take the swing of the bat here on Shadur Sanders and then build the rest of the roster up around him and hopefully capitalize on his rookie contract. It's a tough division, but I think in a couple years you could be looking at this as like it could be theirs. So they're building the right way. I just think they should step on it and figure that quarterback out now rather than later. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, sitting here, Mason Graham. He is not quite my top player on the board at this point, because I do have one guy up higher. But as far as his just talent, he is a top five just pure football player in the class. Still, you get him at six, and in a position of need. Because that was kind of the problem with the other guy who we'll talk about later. And so I just think he's going to be a playmaker for you. He wins quick, and I think his knock is that he doesn't win slower. But when I'm trying to project a guy to give me impact from the interior here, I want them to win quick. In the run game, pass game, I want them to get off blocks quick, make these splash plays that we see dominating that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers ran Vita Vea the same way. He won earlier, he didn't win at all. And when he won early, they were the best defense in the league, and he won early a lot. So they're hoping that they can get a similar level of quick win dominance from Mason Graham that they have gotten previously. So I think it's just a great fit, and he should be able to feast on some of these interior offensive lines in the NFC South. For the Washington Commanders, I have them going with Tetroa McMillan. Again, not quite my top player on the board, but started to look around. I felt pretty good about the Commanders' offensive line, so I wasn't necessarily thinking there. And then I start, if I'm thinking Terry on one side, McMillan on the other, and then you throw, your Christian Watson in the middle as a speed guy. Like I know he's not quite a middle guy, but if I'm just trying to build an offense that can really cook with Jameis Winston, I'd love to get Tetro McMillan and Terry McLaurin catching these deep balls from them. And that sets them up very well for whatever happens next year. If they can get a quarterback for the future in that way, they'll have their two tentpole wide receivers to help anchor the offense. With Saquon Barkley, with Trey McBride, they are going to have one of the nastiest skill positions in the entire league, and I think that can carry their offense. So for me, McMillan was the play. I think he is going to be a dynamic piece for them in the offense. So Dallas Cowboys, Mike Green. I struggled with the Cowboys. I really did. My heart was saying Membo, but they have invested in right tackle specifically, and I think Membo is a right tackle specifically. So then you start to look elsewhere, and for me, I just think they need something dynamic, and Mike Green would be the top edge rusher on the board, probably even top defensive player on the board for me right now, pretty close to. So he is just going to win. He's going to win often. He has done it so his entire college career. And plus, it's Dallas. They never really cared about the character concerns historically. Not speaking on here specifically, just in real life. So I think they'll take the talent. They'll bet on the person to have grown and be better. So I would just say Mike Green is the most dynamic play for them. And for them this year, they need dynamic playmakers to make plays if they're going to pull this off. So for the Cleveland Browns, Armand Membo. He is my fourth highest player in the class. I had Cam Ward at six technically. Again, quarterbacks are random. It's hard to weight them a little bit, but they get fourth and sixth best player in the class, but the quarterback, the best quarterback in the class, and my best offensive lineman in the class. I think that's just a beautiful anchor. Right and left isn't as important, but when you look at the division, you got to put you got TJ Watt lining up on that right tackle side. So you got to put up a good fight against those guys. And so for me, it really wasn't much of a. They spurt the card in here. Get Armand Bimbo, an absolute stud, and they start this. I guess it's really not a rebuild at this point because they've been rebuilding this. They're trying to hit their foot on the gas. They do so in a big way, I think, with this class, and they should be primed to start chipping away at that division lead by the Bengals, Steelers, and Ravens. So on to the Las Vegas Raiders, and they go with Tyler Warren for the Raiders. My MO has been playmakers ever since they drafted Jaden. Right, that's why they go after Leggett. So I start to look at the wide receivers available, and I mean it pretty much would come down to Ibuka for me at this spot. And for my money, with how their team lined up, I think the bigger impact would have been Tyler Warren. Warren is a top 10 player on my board versus Ibuka is more top 15. So I think Warren will step in. The run after catch stuff, sure-handed contested catch guy in the middle. I think Jaden will lean on him, and I think that will help stabilize their offense that was very hot and cold last year. So I want them to get a run after catch threat who can keep moving these chains for them and get their offense to the next level. With obviously Christian McCaffrey helping in the middle, a solid offensive line as well. You start thinking about Will Campbell, but their offensive line has some pretty good pieces here and a couple of dart throws that I think are gonna work out or at least be pretty solid. So I like the way that their offense shapes up. I think clicking in the best playmaker available was the play for them. In this case, Tyler Warren. For the New Orleans Saints, one of the more difficult teams to draft for as we get going, but this one was not difficult. Jahdae Barron, top corner on the board for me. He is a weapon across, if you want to play him a safety, I could, but nickel and outside, I think he will play every single down and be a real impact piece for them. I just love the way that he approaches the corner position. I think he plays with his head on a swivel and always finding that next target in a way that will fit very well with how the Saints' other corners go, which is a more zone heavy team for me. So I think he fits in well, and I think he will elevate this defense to a good extent, which elevating the defense becomes a common theme for the picks I make for them. But for the Arizona Cardinals, another difficult team to draft for. But again, this one, not very difficult. Will Johnson. I think maybe even a touch low how I feel on him, but this is about where I have him on the big board. Just it feels like a weird year for Will, but they hit on Kamari Lassiter last year, and I think you can double down and get some bookends for your corner room here with a Will Johnson, who I think his instincts and coverage are fantastic, and I would bet on him to produce at the level he had previously because corner is just a tough position. I think he's getting a lot of hate this year for not even a bad year, just not quite as good of a step forward as we hoped. So I would just expect him to hit the ground running for them. And a team that was on the edge of the playoffs as they're looking to make that push, I think he's the piece that will help get them there on the defensive side. For the Atlanta Falcons, I have them go with Derek Harmon. They're a team I wanted to build up this defensive line again. They're 2 years removed from having the best defensive line by production in the league, leading the league in sacks, and top three the year before, or something like that. And then for my money, Derek Harmon is the top defensive lineman on the board here. He is a dynamic presence from the interior, especially once he slimmed down to that 315, which is slimmed down to that is kind of crazy. But I think that they need it. They don't really have anybody I feel great about on this interior group. And it's just going to have to be him and Greg Rousseau really making some big time plays. So they hope that Derek Harmon can come in and hit the ground running, and I think he will and be a playmaker for them on the inside, replacing Grady Jarrett as that sort of interior anchor and playmaker. For the Indianapolis Colts, I went with Walter Nolan. Similar thought process here. I want a game wrecker on the inside. Nolan also had a fantastic final season here at Ole Miss, and I think that replacing DeForest Buckner is going to be pretty tough. They traded pick 14 for him back in the day, or 13, I think maybe it was the Kinlaw pick. But so they replace him with a draft pick, so then they lose him in free agency, and I think that Walter Nolan, I mean, he consistently won in the SEC, and it's just an insane athlete. They needs to work on his technique a bit, but the athlete and just the overall physicality he plays with will translate at the bare minimum. So they're hoping that he can develop some more of the bag, but regardless, he's going to be a force for them on day one. Back to the Saints we go, and for them, I went with I picked the didn't hit it right, I guess. Will Campbell. A little low for Will Campbell. I think I have him about top 10. I can look real quick here. I have him at 10. So he falls a bit. I don't even know if they necessarily need him, but he's just a great football player who I think can play up and down the line. I think he's going to play interior. The wingspan is just not great. It's gonna be a struggle for him to deal with length at the next level. He got 33-inch arms, that's great, but the wingspan's still like bottom 2 percentile for a tackle. I think it's gonna even be a struggle for him on the interior. I think arm length for guards is underrated as well. More of just hand placement and hand usage, but it's just harder to do that when you have shorter arms. So for me, interior guy, athletic enough to play tackle. So that's what we're talking. We're gonna flex out to tackle if we need him. But he's just another piece on this offensive line. They haven't quite had a ton of big hits yet for the offensive line. So with as many darts as they have, I think you keep throwing them here and hope you can really build up an awesome unit with a lot of depth. And Will Campbell is the next step towards that. Back up to the Arizona Cardinals, and they will go with James Pierce. So we had them go Will Johnson and now James Pierce. Two guys with a lot of talent. James Pierce, I think, is one of the best edge rushers at just winning in the pass game. He's great at jumping the snap. He is surprisingly good at turning that speed to power off the edge. So I just think that he will play very fast and aggressive. He does kind of um, overrun the Byron Young sort of thing, but I think you kind of put both of them on each end, and you're just talking about a race to the quarterback, which is something I would just be looking to build for Arizona here. A lot of picks for them coming up, so I'm just hoping to, again, get the most talent on the board, and Pierce was my top guy on the board at this time, so it was really easy for me to pick that for them and hope to elevate this defense to a higher level. Because they just needed the edge rush help, I feel. For the Miami Dolphins here, I had them go with Chavon Revel. Revel, sorry, I keep saying it wrong. Chavon Revel. Um, Corner isn't as big of a need as it had been in years past. That being said, Revel is a awesome talent. Coming off the ACL injury is the reason he's available here, uh, which is still, I mean, he's corner 4 off the board. So obviously, I'm very high on this corner class. But as I'm just looking around, I think that his speed will play super well. And then I think that you can play, you know, Slay on the inside, which is something that he's done a little bit of. I think he can play there in the sim. Or maybe play Ravel in the slot, or maybe you just play him as corner 3, or however you do it for this first year. But looking forward, I want to build that corner room up and have it be a sustainable long-term option. And Revel is going to be the guy to be that cornerback too, um, and really solidify the identity of this defense. And I think having the identity of this defense and really the identity of this team as a whole be very valuable for them. So that's why I went Revel. Just again, building up identity, I think, is an underrated thing in a lot of these team building exercises. And for me, that's the thing that they need to do here. So Revel, solidifying that identity for me. Kansas City Chiefs, I have them go with Malachi Starks. Best player on the board. Pretty simple. I don't think they necessarily needed a safety, but I think that they will get a great football player here. He can play kind of up and down the board however you need to. They've got another safety in Trevon Connor who can kind of do that. They have invested in this offense pretty well. I think if you start to look at other guys I would have considered here for them, I mean, you have a Josh Simmons, who I did consider 100%. Emeka Ibuka, again, considered him 100%. But as you just start to look around, you start thinking, okay, well, I think I'm going to take the best football player. In this case, that would be Malachi Starks. I think that the numbers, the testing will line up here for him. Obviously, he didn't run the fastest 40, but I think he looked very good in the drills. So I would have no issues with him being a first round pick. Top 15 guy for me on my board. Get him here at 18. Of course, we're not going to see too many huge falls for guys because this is all what I would do. I'm not going to let a guy who I'm high on fall. So Malachi Starks would be an excellent fit, an excellent pick for them as they look to get this team over the hump and into the playoffs. for the Rams. Back up again. Actually, is it back up or is it first pick? I've already forgotten. Bad podcasting. Anyway, Rams. Josh Simmons. Thought about it for the last pick. Rams need offensive tackle help. This would be, without injury, would be my top offensive tackle on the board. My top left tackle, regardless of the injury. So for Josh Simmons, I just feel like his technique, his presence in pass protection was excellent. I think his run blocking is a little bit underrated, so I think he can really grow into being a complete tackle who, at the next level, coming off the injury, especially going into year two off of a big knee injury, you're usually a lot stronger because of the rehab of it. That's what I'm looking forward to him to get that strength up and really solidify himself as a rock solid left tackle protecting Caleb Williams for the Denver Broncos. Shamar Stewart. So Stewart, I mean, I've gone up and down with Shamar Stewart. This has been one of the tougher guys to rank. This group of edges here that we'll kind of get into. I've been very difficult on, but they've played Shamar inside a lot, and it makes evaluations very tough for guys who play inside. I would have loved for him to win more often, 100%. And the lack of production definitely scares me from this pick, but I think in the end, the flashes for him showing good technique and athleticism um, make him a different player than I've seen. But I also think at 20, the level of athleticism you're getting for him to put it together at his natural position, I think that's a good enough value for a team that does, I mean, want that upside. They have Bradley Chubb, they have Andrew Van Ginkel, right? You can play Shamar Stewart inside on early downs and see what happens. Or you can play him inside on later downs. I think you can get him on the field. Um, and then for me, he just ended up kind of being one of the best players available. And I had to swing the bat again for Denver. And I think it'll work out for them. I think they're going to get a good quality edge rusher who maybe is more of a number two, but the athleticism on any given day can really wreck a game. So that's why I ended up going with Shamar Stewart. True first round grade for me. And of the guys available, he was just the best fit of them. So that's why I went where I did. Now for the New York Football Giants, Emeka Ibuka. Now they've invested in the wide receiver room. They've got a good room. Make no mistake about it. But as I look around at the board, I think they've got good investments everywhere I'd be looking. And for me, their defense I think is going to be solid. And then I think if I take one of the other corners I've got pretty high, I feel better about it. But would I feel good enough about it to make a big enough difference for what I think I can make on their offense? And to me, when I look at Mike Evans, Jalen Waddle, and Emeka Ibuka, I think that those guys are going to be impossible to contain. Right, I already think Mike Evans and Waddle will be impossible to contain. You throw in Ibuka, who has played this tertiary role and been very productive in it at Ohio State. He can play the Z, he can play the slot, so you can kind of mix him and Waddle up in that role with Mike Evans as your anchor X out there. I think that this offense is going to be just too much to handle. I don't like Slayton's fit with his team because I think his sacrificial X role was really the thing he gave them. I'd love to see them move on from him. And then you got Wandale as sort of the gadget slot guy, um, number four wide receiver. I love Wandale in that role. I don't love him as the number three in this case because I think he'd be playing the slot, or Slayton would play it a second, an outside Z, and I don't love that for him as much either. So I'd love to see them move on from one of those two, preferably Slayton, and play Ibuka in that wide receiver three role and let him cook. This offense could be really humming. So that's why I went Ibuka. Kind of a maximizing strengths sort of pick versus covering weaknesses, but I really didn't have any weaknesses to cover. So I think it's best just to go all in on strengths there. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in a bit of a snipe, they take Amarian Hampton, one pick ahead of, I think, the Bears, who would have absolutely sprinted this card in. The Bucks have a lot of holes. But I think just kind of taking best player available is the way to go, and kind of playing the board a little bit too here. If I'm remembering this correctly, they get to take a Marion Hampton, who I think is one of the best players on the board, and I think that they're going to feel very good about the options they have sitting there with their next pick. Based off of where I want them to go. I won't give too much away, but there is a guy I was actually targeting here that I felt would have fallen to me just looking at the rosters and needs of the teams behind me. So there's a player who I would have probably taken first, but I think that the Bears and Packers would have jumped on a Marion Hampton, so I don't want to let them jump on him, and potentially even the Chargers. So, playing the draft game a little bit against myself is hard, but I think even looking at these rosters in a vacuum, I would also make the same determination. So, for the Chicago Bears, getting their players sniped out from under them a little bit for me, I had them go with Donovan Ezeraku, and I don't know if I spelled this correctly. I didn't check all the spellings, so not my thing. But edge rush is a bit of a black hole for them, unfortunately. Zedarius was a big anchor for them last year, but he just got old, and they had to let him kind of walk. So now it's just James Houston as edge two. That's not going to work. Ezeraku, I think, is a fluid mover with a great pass rush move set. He is going to come in day one and be a solid number two edge rusher next to Alex Highsmith and give them a good floor again for the defense that is going to need to see some guys really step up. In this case, the rookie Donovan Ezeraku will be the guy doing that at edge. For the LA Chargers here, I have them going with Colston Loveland. Now, it's a real life favorite, and maybe that influenced me a lot. Oh, Chargers, Harbaugh, Loveland, right? But they have nothing at tight end, dude. And I like Loveland to be that wide receiver weapon there. I think his blocking leaves a little to be desired, but it's not like they have anybody who you feel great about regardless in that regard. So he might even be their best blocking tight end, but I just think he's such a gamer on the interior with great production. Even as the offense completely catered, he still carried the offense overall. I think that he is going to do a great job solidifying this unit that needs a playmaker. And in a lot of the same ways as I talked about with the Raiders, as I start looking at my wide receiver rankings and where I sit them, it kind of comes down to I think who's my next pick actually. And if I mean, I guess I can talk about it. If I'm talking about Jaden Higgins, with Mike Williams, who I think is washed, but if I'm trying to build an offense for this year, the team is on the downslope. So I'm just trying to hit one last peak before I think it's reload time fully. And that's, I think, Loveland because he doesn't fill the same role as a Mike Williams you're hoping can do. So I think I'll be looking at some of these other guys later to fill wide receiver, but Loveland as the anchor in the pass game. For the Green Bay Packers, I mentioned him, Jaden Higgins at wide receiver. I think he is a very underrated number one caliber wide receiver for a team that will need it. Alec Pierce is a solid deep threat guy. They've got some weapons underneath as well. Dontavian Wicks being able to catch the ball. So you got Romeo Dobbs. So you've got weapons there. But I want Jaden Higgins stepping up over the top. He's the man. He's going to run this offense through. The offense is going to run through him. Give him the full route tree and let him cook. With Jordan Love, who has a proclivity to throw up jump balls, and Jaden Higgins, who has a proclivity to come down with them. So I think it's a good fit for everybody involved, and I think this is one of the pieces that they'll need to get this offense from a we really suck to a we're good level. So that's why I went with Jaden Higgins here. And then for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, playing the draft game, and this is only really available to them mainly because of the injury concerns. I have them going with. Oh, sorry, I totally forgot who I did here. I did somebody else later. Sorry, I was thinking of a different team. Bro, brain. Okay, I did this literally this morning, guys. Anyway, Gray's able. So I looked at the teams here. Bears, I don't think they go online. They had a huge needed edge after running back. Chargers, I think that they'll look later because the receiver room's so bad. And Packers, they have Gary, or not, they have guys that do this, right? Cosme and Elkton. They're looking tackle all the way. So for them, the Buccaneers have invested a lot in the offensive line. I went with Grace Abel as the top player available, but also I think he would have been in consideration with their previous pick. And so yeah, that's why I did it. I totally goofed this on the narrative part of it, but oh well, I'm not redoing it. So Grace Abel, great football player, going to um, really anchor this offensive line in a real way. So obviously, big fan of Grace Abel. Have him as a first rounder all the way. They get him here at number 26, which is still one spot behind where I have him ranked. So, um, yeah. Anyway, Tennessee Titans. I had them go with Kelvin Banks. They lost Spencer Brown, and I think that they need tackle help. Kelvin Banks is an underrated tackle at this stage of the process. Honestly, even a bit feels a bit low for him to a degree. It's about where I have him on the draft board, but still feels low. I just like some of the guys ahead of him, I guess. But even still, I think he is an excellent player. and going to be an excellent fit for them in Tennessee. So just kind of beefing up the offensive line. They're going to want to run the football. Got to protect Bo Nix. So he's a good fit for them, and I think he will be a good, solid first round tackle. Sorry, the guy that I started talking about earlier, Baltimore, who didn't play the draft game to get here. That was a mistake, but I think that they are jumping out of their seats at how this has gone down for them. This is just taking the best player available. He feels like a Baltimore Raven. Jihad Campbell. And, I mean, no doubt about it. Like, listen, this guy is an absolutely awesome football player. Sam kind of type. Over there's 3-4, kind of more the blitzing linebacker. He's got some coverage instincts, but he is just such an awesome football player. You got to worry about the injuries a bit. Um, I mean, that's just going to be a reality of the game you got to play here. But I think that he is just such a good football player that Baltimore in this spot, you just don't get an opportunity to draft this good of a football player at 28 very often. And I think that they just have to jump on it. Even as you may say, oh, I don't know if it's going to be the best fit or however it may go, they need good football players on rookie contracts. He's going to be one of those. You can make the rest work around him. So, Jihad Campbell, sprint the ticket in. Now to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And who knows what these idiots are going to do. But I had them go with Josh Connerly. Just good tackle prospect. He's showed he's trying to play the right side, left side there. It's the Senior Bowl. It didn't go particularly well when you lined up against Mike Green, but I think he's got a lot of potential, great physical tools. I think he played pretty well there at Oregon. So looking for him to be, he's a first round tackle for me, and we'd be looking for him to be the swing guy, potentially starting right tackle, kind of depending on who goes to Patrick Paul, and they're just going to figure it out. So Connerly, not the perfect fit for a tackle here, but certainly the talent is there for Connerly. So a first round guy for me all the way. Now to the Washington Commies, Kenneth Grant, a monster on the interior. And if I am Washington, I feel very good about how this draft has panned out for them so far, right? They sit there at 7 and get Tetairoa McMillan, and then they get an absolute monster on the interior in Kenneth Grant. You are feeling fantastic about this on the interior and overall for your team. You get an offensive defense for Grant. Just a true two-way dominant force pass run game. Um, and that is really, I mean, what they need. They don't really have much else here um, for their interior defensive line. They punted on Mozzie, so that's not going to be really in the picture. So they also got rid of. Um, no, they still have Deron Payne, right? Yeah, they kept Deron Payne. Sorry, but yeah, so Deron Payne, Kenneth Grant, going crazy on the interior. I think it's an excellent fit for them, and it will be a very fun team to watch as they start to build this defense a little bit. For the Saints, I had them go with Jalen Walker. We are back on the elevating the defense train. Jalen is such a fantastic athlete, kind of an edge linebacker hybrid. I think that he is a edge. I have him listed as an edge, primarily with some linebacker flexibility. For a team that runs a little bit more 4-3, I could see them playing him as the Sam, rush the end, that sort of role. They've got guys at the edge. I'm not trying to say they don't. They've got guys everywhere, but not a lot of contract term for these guys. So as I'm looking at it, I went with Jalen Walker, believing in the talent. I mean, I'm taking best player available for them, and it's going to end up being a lot of overlapping positions, but he's a flexible player, very good athlete, with good instincts in the pass rushing aspect of it that I think that he can pan out. I'm not going to love him dropping the coverage, but you're going to have to live with some good and bad, especially here at the end of the first for a guy this athletic. Then, last up for the Rams, guy I've gone a little bit up and down on too, Luther Burden. I have now finally ended on him being a first to second round guy. I have him at number 29 on the big board. I've had him as low as 40 and as high as 15 throughout this process, and I do kind of settle on him here in like the 30-ish range. And for the Rams, I think he's going to be an excellent run after catch guy. They don't have a lot of dynamic playmakers in this team with Juju and Tyler Boyd. Boyd did a lot of his work in the intermediate game, was a real weapon for them. He's going to be again, but you need Burden to step up and be a secondary playmaker for them, stabilize this offense, and get them over the hump. Him and Josh Simmons really trying to elevate this offense to a unit that can consistently win for them with Caleb Williams is the way I went for them. So that's our first round done. I did two. I was gonna do three, but I didn't decide to spend all year on it. Back with the Saints, and with the Saints, we start the second round off with Darius Alexander, interior guy, real playmaker. I love his upside, his athleticism, a technique on the interior. Should be a game wrecker for them. He's a bit older, but with a team with as many picks and darts as they have, I think you want to invest in a guy who's going to be good off the gate and get them to the next level. Darius Alexander is that guy for me. Just an absolute beast out of Toledo. Just missing the first round. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, I have them go with Matthew Golden. A guy very high on a lot of boards, and I think the Jaguars would feel excellent about this pick landing where it does. Um, just because they didn't have to go up for him or nothing. They get Genty and they get Golden to go around. Um, sorry, to go around Geno Smith. So they're building this up, and they're gonna have, I think, a couple more picks here to really continue to build this up. So that's where I sit. Their offensive line, like I said, is solid, and their defense is going to be a work in progress. But at the very least, they're going to put up points, and that might be enough in that division. Speaking of that division, Houston, the Texans now on the clock, and they will go with Trey Amos, corner. Now it sounds weird. Seems weird when you look at their corner room to think go corner again, but you got Bland on the 1 year. You got shoot, there's someone else on the 1 year. I should have wrote all this down instead of having to look at all the sheets. Oh well, podcasting. We got it. We're nailing it. Sheets loading. But so yeah, I mean you still got uh, McCreary and Bland on 1 years, and after that you're left with obviously 2 years of Still and 3 years of Phillips. Still then have the third year RFA. So Phillips and Still, looking at your long term options. One of McCreary or Bland you do expect to get extended, but I think Amos is a first round player. So you get a first round player here, top of the second. Amos I think is a real stud in coverage. I love his man coverage skills, and I think he fits really well with how they want to play this. And can let them maybe move on from Bland a year early if they get a good offer. So that's I think where I'm trying to sit them at, just because they are in a bit of a transition potentially, and I think that investing in this corner group specifically will pay off in the second round, regardless of how deep you are. So I went with that, just trusting the talents available rather than focusing on need. For the Patriots, I went with T.J. Sanders, an interior guy with a great feel for the game. Um, and so I went with him mainly because I think that one of the biggest things they needed on the interior, he's a bit undersized, but they do have like a Keon White on the outside who's oversized for the edge, right? So you can kind of patchwork this together. You get a big guy and a smaller guy on the inside, but I think Sanders is just a baller. I think this is just what it is. He can really rush from the interior. And I think that's going to be the big dynamic difference for them is that he is going to be, especially on these sub packages, going up against guards. He's just going to be too quick for them, too good at hands. He's going to be in the backfield a lot. And for a defense that just needs some more explosiveness, he'll be an excellent fit. For the Minnesota Vikings, I have them go with my guy, Wyatt Milam. Listen, he's not the side for a lot of people, but as I look at the Vikings, the knock on Wyatt Milam is he's not an athlete. He doesn't have crazy measurables. He's got good measurables. I mean, basically 80th percentile across the board. But this is a team with freak athletes in a lot of places. So I think getting a guy who just knows how to win in the run game, in the pass game, put him at guard, and just let him work. Put him next to Aquanu, dude. Him and Aquanu are going to be a perfect combination, like a fire and ice sort of thing. Wyatt Milam calling stuff out, great movement on the feet, shoring things up, and Aquanu is a mauler. He's going to dominate on the edge. So I love these two working together, or put him on the other side with O'Neal, a very experienced guy. The communication and awareness on that sideline would be fantastic as well. So I think that he shores this group up in a way that I don't think any other pick at the spot could. And I think that he will really elevate the floor of this offense. Maybe not the ceiling. They hit some real high highs last year, but they hit some lows, and I think Milam can be a stabilizing force for them on the interior of the offensive line. The Arizona Cardinals back up, and they go with Nick Emanwari. I struggled with this pick a great deal. Emanwari is the lowest guy I have taken relative to draft slot at this point, and by a decent bit. I've got Emanwari as a let's see here. Sorry, I have him right here. 54th best player in the class. So this is a real reach for me. But I look at this team, they've got a lot of depth, a lot of talent. I think that they need to take a big swing, a lot like they did with Adebaware a couple years ago. They just took a swing on a crazy athlete when they had a lot of picks and depth. I am taking Imanwari to be a true tight end matchup, sub linebacker, real downhill player. It's not a role he played necessarily very much at South Carolina, but it's a role I think he will excel at. And I think that's kind of why his production lags. They didn't play him in a role that was very natural for him. The experience playing top down coverage is very good. It will help him have versatility at the next level, but I want to see him get down and dirty in the box and use those physical gifts in a real way. And Arizona is the team that can give him the freedom to do so. So I'm a big fan of Eamon Wari to them specifically here, and it's a reason why I felt so comfortable going outside of my own board for him. For the New England Patriots, Jonah Savanaia, again, spelling, but I think he's just awesome on the interior. Good mover, will just be another piece to them building up this offensive line. I would love to just see him put him on the same side as all and let him go to fucking work. And that's I think something that might even happen in real life on the opposite side. I think that'd be very fun. But I would invest in that. I continue to their investments there, and for me, he was the top offensive lineman available, so it was an easy pick to send in for the Patriots. For the Saints, I have them go with Nick Scourton, a guy who I have a first round grade on, first to second, I believe. I think he's the last of those guys. Yep, he was the last guy. So as I talked about with elevating this defense, you drafted Jalen Walker earlier, and you think I can't really go edge again, but I'm taking the best players available. Their edge room is either not great, which I think it is not great, and expiring. So it's like you got guys, you got to pay them too. So it's like I think this class is so good, you could just draft again, get yourself 4 more years, 5 more years, and really reset here. Scourton and Jalen, I think, fit very well together. With Tui Pelotu as well, as I start to look at that long term, I like the way that all these guys can work. Scourton is down about 15, 16 pounds, closer to where I think he played at Purdue. And I think that you can get that Purdue guy out of him. So for Scourton, I'm taking the swing on him. I have him as a first round guy. It just didn't really work out for the needs of the other teams sitting here. So for me, this worked out fantastically, and I would just have to swing the bat if I was New Orleans. Tampa Bay up here, and they will go with Michael Williams. So similar thing. We're taking a swing on athleticism at edge. He is a guy who's very high on a lot of boards. He's actually not a first rounder for me. He's right on the line. He's 35th. He's my first second round grade true. But for Tampa, they need the edge rush help, and I think that he will be a nice, solid foundation for a defensive line as a more of a solid number two for me, with the athleticism to potentially pay off as a number one if he can shore up his technique. He's not quite fast enough to feel like he's going to be a true dynamic sack machine, but if he can get his hands right, he can really put up a ton of pressure numbers, which will still disrupt this offense in a big way. So, Michael was my pick here for them. Now the Commanders in their Tampa Bay Buccaneers sandwich, they go with Princely and Monumelon. Now, again, draft game played here. Bucks went with Michael to force the Commanders down a spot, but Princely and Monumelon is just such a prolific winner off the edge. I think he wins in both phases of the game. He does so very consistently. He does so off of athleticism in a way I don't know will fully translate, but a guy who knows how to win, who has a feel for how to win, is so valuable to me. And I have him right about in line here with this pick. I have him at 40th on my board, so right there at 42. I think that he is a fantastic bet to make for the Washington Commanders, who don't have a lot of good bets to make anyway. I had him kind of circled for one of these teams that have no edge help, and he just ended up being the guy to fall to Washington here specifically, mainly because of the edges falling in general. We had 3 of them go in a row, and that's because a lot of these early second teams just didn't quite need him. So I could see Washington, if they made a move up to like Arizona, to switch and get Scourton, I'd love it. So I would understand how kind of one of these teams made a move, kind of seeing the writing on the wall. I would think nobody would expect the Saints to take him though, but I think they'd want to jump above the Bucks. So that's kind of how I feel about the gamesmanship at the middle of this class. But in Monty Mellon, I think I'd be fantastic to end up with him, no doubt about it. The Bucks back up. Benjamin Morrison, I think one of the last of these corners, not quite the last, but we're running down on the board here. And Benjamin Worson, I have also very high. I have him at 36. Again, corner didn't quite line up all the way. Um, and I love Benjamin Worson. I'm worried about the hip, and I think that the Bucks are the team that should take the swing on the injury concern potential, and just say we're getting a good football player. We're gonna let that ride. We're gonna get a good football player, and we're gonna figure it out. So for me, good football player wins out. Benjamin Morrison would be a first round guy without the hip. They get him here because of the hip. Texans back up, and they go with Dylan Sampson. Now listen, hey, don't come at me, Houston. All right, hey, we're friends. All right. But that being said, um, this is not a bet against Kyron Williams. This is a bet on Kyron Williams if I've ever seen one. Dylan Sampson is a we're doing the old school Panthers sort of way. It's like a fire and ice. We're trying to create the Lions thing. He'll be your Dave Montgomery. Sampson's going to try to be your Gibbs. Now these are both discount versions to me, but you're trying to replicate that dynamic here. And I think Sampson is a very dynamic playmaker who will give them a little bit of what they lost with CMC. We can't afford CMC, but we can recreate him in the aggregate. We're trying to aggregate him out here. Dylan Sampson's the pick. Colts up, and they go with Darian Porter, corner out of Iowa State. It's a big swing. It's a risk for sure. It's a 1 year guy who's a 6th year senior, former wide receiver, but the athletic testing is too much to be denied here. Just simply too rare of a specimen. The speed, the size, the fluidity in the hips, and just the experience level on special teams as well. Like he's played a lot of football, he just hasn't played it at corner yet. I'd love to bet on him figuring it out. It's been no secret that I've been very high on all these Iowa State guys, but Dylan Sampson for me. Sorry, Darian Porter for me. I looked at the wrong name. Darian Porter for me would be the swing that the Colts have to make here because they just need to hit big if they're going to turn this window around. So that's why I swung there. And then the corner run ends here. I got nobody else left, I think. Seattle Seahawks, Azariah Thomas. I think he is an absolute stud, a real baller in secondary. Maybe not quite the upside I'd be hoping for Seattle, right? I think I would have rather gone with a Morrison or Porter, but they both went just above them with no trades for them to do anything about it. But Azariah Thomas is a consolation prize here. He is still a true second round grade for me. I think he's still even higher than this pick. Yes, he's 44th on my board, so still good value for the board here. And I just think he is an absolute rock solid and real physical player for them, and mentally tough. Like he's gonna fit in. He's gonna play a role for them, no doubt. It's tough to find players who are gonna play a role for Seattle, but I think he's gonna be another dart at this corner room, and I think he can really hit for them. Detroit, Jack Sawyer, not quite my top edge. I don't believe. I think I have one more higher than him. Yes, I had one more higher than him, but I think I love it. I'd love it to happen in real life. I think it'd be so fun. And I think he's a good number two edge archetype. The analytics really love him. Like not even like him. Like they really love this guy. So if the analytics are right on this guy, you get a first round talent here at 47. I'm not that high on him. I've got him as a second round guy. But that being said, I think it's a swing you got to make next to Hutchinson and really try to elevate this because he lost a lot on this defensive line. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, second time around in this round, I went with Xavier Watts. I mean, just an excellent football player at safety. Kind of a common theme for the safety room, honestly. It's a lot of guys who don't go that high but are very good. And Xavier Watts, just be a playmaker on the back end. They've invested a lot in the offense early, so now they start to turn their eyes towards the defense, which I think maybe they missed the boat on a touch. Maybe you could have waited and seen if the wide receivers played out here, but just with the room as in bad a shape as it is, I don't think you want to wait too long on that. And so I think you get Watts here. You feel very good about that. Their corner room's pretty solid too, so I don't even know how many of these guys they would have really missed out on. Maybe edge would have been the bigger thing they missed out on, but regardless, I think they feel very good sitting here at 48 and getting Xavier Watts. For the Green Bay Packers, the pick they got for Jair Alexander, and they go with Cam Scatabo at running back. I like their running back room. Jordan Mason had a great year and everything like that, but and the Bengals running back, I can't remember right now, is also pretty solid. But I think Cam Scatterbo is a lead bell cow back type of guy, a real first guy in, last guy out, sort of real sneaky athletic guy. And I just think he's just gonna be a really good culture player for this Packers team. So obviously I had to go with him there. But I think he's just a great running back. So makes guys miss, runs hard. I think he'll fit what Green Bay tries to do on offense. And like I said, elevating the offense as a whole, going with um, good fit there. I feel the Lions back up. Omar Norman Lott, my favorite player in the second round. I'm not afraid to say it. My favorite player to watch. It's I think he is going to be a difference maker in a real way. And I think that he hasn't gotten a chance to show it because Tennessee hates me specifically. I think they really hate me, and they say that they don't want me to be happy and enjoy life. But that being said, Omar Norman Lott still makes me enjoy life and makes me happy. He'd be a guy that I would swing on for any team, and regardless of your situation, I would say, you know what, you really fucking hit it. And for here, he falls to the Detroit Lions, who kind of always seem to get these guys I like anyway. Um, and I just think that he is going to fit in so well. They get Mozzie and they get Levi and Rosareke this season. And I think him and Mozzie fit well together. Levi is a little undersized too. You get a little bit of that. I think Norman Lott is underrated as a run defender because he wasn't given a ton of opportunities to do so. Maybe it's because he can't. Maybe they see in practice he can't do it. I think it's Tennessee problem specifically. I would love to see because the way he operates in the pass game, the fork move he hits, the way he uses his hands, the power he shows when he does that. I think you can get him to do that in the run game too. I don't think he's a lost cause there. So not going to be a double team guy. He's going to be a 5 tech, 3 tech, 4 eye, um, dynamic playmaker though. Inside sub package monster. So for Detroit, I love it. I'm swinging on it all the way. The Rams back up and they go with C.J. West. Now C.J. West, a little bit of a different archetype here, but also a lot of the same. I believe he is. Do I have my size listed on here yet? I don't think I do. Yes, yes 317. I did have it listed. Okay. He's dude. He is he's so fun too. I took him back to back, not even intentionally, but kind of looking at the Rams, I didn't really have much else to do. But he's the perfect build. He is 317 but short, like 6 foot flat, and just explosive as hell. A fucking bowling ball in the run game, in the pass game. I don't think anybody's gonna be able to really get leverage on him on the inside, right? You put him up against the center, he's got to snap and get his head up, and he's got to get underneath the guy who is this low to the ground because he plays so low too. You're gonna need to get somebody really strong to kind of push him down through his leverage. But I mean, we talk about it with the running backs a lot. Like he's like a running back here, contact balance. Like he gets hit and nobody knocks him off his spot. So West, I'm a big fan of CJ West. He is going to be a monster for this LA Rams defense, and was like an easy pick here. I honestly consider him for the Lions too, but I love Norman Lott so damn much in the pass game. But CJ West is also up there. Just a really fun player who I believe in a lot to translate, with the size being a good floor for him. For the Kansas City Chiefs, back up here, and I have them go with Trey Harris. Um, we both talked about him on the wide receiver room, so maybe I'm not doing a very good smoke screen here for him. But he wins so well, and if I his man coverage win ability, he's a man beater all the way. You put him in, you get Tyreek Hill and him, and then you get a litany of other guys. But him and Mahomes would be such a good duo when they get that chemistry going. Because I think he elevated Jackson Dart in a lot of these throws. You get him with a guy like Patrick Mahomes who can put that ball anywhere you want down the field, really threaten the defense. With Harris, who had a great feel against man and zone, but I mean, man, he was a monster. Contested catch god. Like, I love this fit for them in the middle of the second, and it's a big reason why I felt confident going with Malachi Starks early is because I felt better about the second round of wide receivers and Trey Harris being an excellent fit there. For the Minnesota Vikings, I know they've got Aaron Jones on the roster, but I think Caleb Johnson is so damn good, and Aaron Jones has struggled with injuries regardless. I think that Johnson ends up being the number one here sooner rather than later, and then I think Aaron Jones transitions to more of a spell guy, 35-40% of the snaps at best sort of guy. And I think that's the correct decision because he's not held up well with injuries as of late. Caleb Johnson, monster here. I would feel super happy as a Vikings fan to end up with Caleb because I mean, listen, the Derrick Henry look is there. It's there 100%. He breaks angles. Like, guys don't get good angles on him. Really fast players don't catch up to him. And that's the same thing you say all the time about Derrick Henry. Ah, man, he's not that fast, but nobody catches him either. And when they do catch him, Caleb Johnson's got a fucking stiff arm way to bury him. Because, I mean, if you're fast enough to catch him, you're not big enough to tackle him. So his vision is fantastic. He's not quite the most nimble guy, but in the game, I love a guy who's just a one cut, get up field, and just go. So Caleb Johnson, huge fan of here. Green Bay back up after the Scatterbo pick, and they go with Ariante Ursary. Talked about their offensive line a bit earlier, how I didn't think they'd go with Gray Zabel, and that is because I think they need a tackle. I think they considered it there, but they decided to go receiver, and I think Ursary is the one of two second round tackles who I feel good about sitting here. We'll get to the other one later. I just think that he is going to be a good fit for them for what they look for. He's huge. He moves well too. So it's like you're talking about a guy who physically gives you everything you're looking for with the size and movement skills. He can erase a lot of mistakes. He does make a lot of mistakes. Um, Especially this past year wasn't his cleanest year, but 2023 he had the hype of a first round guy, so I think you just expect him to get closer to 2023, put together the footwork and stuff. He's shown some capability to do so. It has the athleticism to do it, and you will have yourself a rock solid tackle, a true tackle for this team. That I think is what they are missing. For the Chargers, back up again, and they go with Jack Besh. Um, Jack Besh is I'm not the highest on him. We talk about him as just a guy I'm not the super highest on, but he he had a terrible offense. I really don't like that TCU offense the way it went, but he was productive in it regardless. So you say he could still put up good production. He doesn't drop the football, and he does get open. You kind of get that guy. That's why his production was so good. He's giving his quarterbacks clean targets, and he's always bringing that ball in. I think his contested catch is a little bit hit or miss, but this Chargers offense should be able to get him running free. So we talked about the Chargers wanting to build up this unit here with Pooney last year. You start to fill out the offensive line pretty good. So you add Jack Bech as wide receiver, maybe a little bit redundant with Mike Williams talked about earlier, but I think he can play the Z because he's athletic enough to. You got Shakir in the middle as the slot guy, and then Loveland at tight end. I think that that's a unit who can push for the AFC West again with the Chiefs bulking up. Bears back up. They go with Landon Jackson at edge, so they double up. Listen, this class is so good. Maybe it's a little early to double up. But Landon Jackson is the guy who I have falling at this point in the draft. So they are kind of falling on the sword a little bit here. They're catching the falling knife. Landon Jackson I have as pick as a 46, which would be my best guy on the board here at this point, I believe. So that's what I'm betting on with him. I'm a little up and down on him as well. I think this is about the lowest I've had him at. But his run defense is so good that I feel confident about his floor here. And as we start to look forward to a potential future with these three, if they all work out, I think he plays on the early downs. Maybe he slides inside. I can get a little bit bigger. Maybe he slides inside because he's a bigger guy, I believe. But regardless, like I think that the three of them will work together to create a great unit with Money Mellon and Landon Jackson. Jackson being a bit more of a floor player, Money Mellon a bit more of a ceiling player. So I think the balance works good here in the second round. I'd take the swing both times. Now for the LA Rams, Tyler Booker. Now, I didn't have a great idea. I just wanted to see CJ West and Tyler Booker go head to head and practice every day. So, I mean, listen, the Rams, they have a solid foundation. Their needs that they have didn't totally line up here, so I started to think about who would be my best player available rather than focusing on needs, because I'm looking at who is available here. I've got, let's see here. I've colored all these in at this point, so I can't. It's harder to go back to. But Swessinger is available here. Booker was the guy, obviously, I went with. And then I get into my guys who are more edge of day 2, 3, or round 2 and 3. It's Noel, Grant, Kennard. So it was kind of a mix of, and I like the running backs here too, but they don't need running backs. They invested heavily in running backs. They got 2 guys in who they paid a decent amount of money to, so it just really couldn't be that guy. So I was stuck a little bit on what to do, so I decided to go with Tyler Booker, who I think is a very good player. Some people have him as a true first round guy. Don't think he has the athleticism to do it, but you put him in the phone booth, he wins well, and they have a good ish offensive line, and they need strengths. He will be a strength gap blocking monster. And again, I'd love to see him and CJ West go head to head in practice. Tennessee Titans back up. I believe their last pick finally has arrived, and they go with Kyle Kennard. I just mentioned him. I struggled a little bit on what to do with Tennessee as well. I think this is a little bit of an awkward part of the draft for a lot of teams. I've got him as a second to third round edge rusher here. As I start to compare him to, they got Chase Young and they got um, Jonathan Greenard in there at the edge. So you feel very good about this edge room. So I'm not trying to say that, but I think that he is a dynamic pass rusher who can come in and give them a bit more juice. And I love his plan. His plan and execution are fantastic. So he comes up, lines up the guy. He knows how to use his hands very well. And just his initial move is fantastic. He's a DPR because he doesn't have great strength, and I don't think his counters are there. But I think he could take that next step to be that guy. And as you start to look more long term, kind of replacing Chase Young potentially long term, or replacing Greener long term, 2, 3 years left, I think having three is important. I think he's a perfect number three for them. And then as you step forward, I think he will step up to be their number two long term. So I think it's a long term play, but with good role this season. Cincinnati Bengals up next. And they were a tough team to go for, but I had them go with Tate Ratledge. I think that he's a bit of a steal here. He's right here on my board, but he just feels like I have him too low. A great athletic interior offensive lineman who, I mean, just the movement skills are so insane. Like his run blocking will be so good for them on the interior. I think he needs to clean up his hand usage and kind of marry that up with his feet on the interior, and his anchor needs to get better. So we start talking about a little bit of pass blocking concerns. I think that's probably why he ends up low because it's so important in today's game. But that being said, you don't get this kind of movement skills very often. I think you bet on him to figure it out and be an anchor for this offensive line. Now to the Saints, I have them go with Jalen Noel. Listen, they don't necessarily need it, but best player available is where we're going. And in this case, Jalen Noel, I considered him for a lot of picks coming up. A lot of guys had a slot guy they already liked, or maybe just didn't need to invest this much. I really, really considered him for the Bengals, honestly, and I was like, fuck, he's going to put up 200 yards a game on me. But I ended up going with Ratledge for the Bengals because they needed the help on the interior. The Saints don't need any help anywhere specifically, so taking a great player like Jalen Noel here at 60 is a great value, and I think he will fill in super nicely with a Jamar Chase kind of duo long term. Honestly, I think it's where it's going to end up. But regardless of how they spend their money, he will find a role on this team. I feel. San Francisco 49ers are up next. They're a tough team because they kind of need everything, and I had them go with Charles Grant. Now, Grant is the second of these tackles I feel good about in the second round. He's more of a second, third, but he's still up there. And for me, he is. It's competition, right? That's the concern. It's the strength of competition is the concern with Charles Grant. Because he played at William and Mary. That's just not a very high profile program. He looked very good at the Senior Bowl to me, and I think that quells a lot of these concerns. He is 6'5", 35-inch arms. He's got pretty decent hand usage, so that's a bit raw, but he moves well. And I think he does a good job of using that movement and size in the run game. So I think you have a guy who has put together a decent portion of his pass game, a decent portion of his run game, and I think the floor of that can start a tackle for them, and they fucking need a starter at tackle so fucking badly. They are in a rough spot as a roster, and tackle just ended up being the worst of all of the worst here. They've got to get busy here after the draft on the free agency side because they've got to figure it out. Unfortunately, they are in a tough spot. But Grant, I think, is a starter day one. Love to see him get a chance here in San Francisco. Pittsburgh Steelers back up, and they went with this time Harold Fannin Jr. Now, I don't need a tight end. But that being said, I have been driving the Harold fan club. See, fan club. Anyway, uh, so I gotta put my money where my mouth is here. I feel like if the board, I mean, this is a lot of. I took all the players I really liked, right? This is my board. I drafted off of for here, so I haven't left anybody for me to like in the highest extent, but I do have Van as a second round guy, and I think he is going to pan out. I've got Ingram for one more year, so he's a tight end two to then a tight end one, and I think that he can be a very solid playmaker at the next level. I think he's got the athleticism to do it. So, money where the mouth is. Harold Fannin, come on down. Welcome to Pittsburgh. Philadelphia Eagles up next, and they go with Carson Schlesinger. Now, the Eagles, I think, get the steal of my board so far. Carson Schlesinger, I have him in the early 40s. It just hasn't worked out for linebacker the rest of the way here, and it just didn't seem like a great fit. But the Eagles, man, the Eagles could certainly use a really good linebacker here. To get Schlesinger to fall into their lap is a dream come true for me. I'm trying to look at their depth chart first, and then I'll kind of go into my scouting report on them. But of course, it's not loading, because I want to make sure they didn't sign like a bunch of fucking expensive guys here. Yeah, a Gainer and Kendrick. So Kendrick's obviously good guy to have, good bring in. But you need at least two, so they've got to find somebody else around Gainer. And Schlesinger for me would fit in so well. He gets to learn from Kendricks, which is a huge benefit for him. But he's just it's just a crazy athlete, and I think he's a great tackler in space. I think that's the biggest thing. He's a chase and tackle guy right now. But I think that he has shown enough feel and coverage. It's very hard to see feel and coverage from these linebackers at this level because they are asked to do nothing. They aren't even asked to run to the same spot all the time most of the time. They're like, fucking go out there and fucking do something. I think that he has shown me enough to believe that he will at some point be able to recognize route concepts coming at him and identify threats in the zone game. That's the hardest thing for linebackers to do. I think he's shown me enough to say that he will do that at a rudimentary level to then have the athleticism and tackling ability to become a good linebacker at the next level. So for me, for Philly, that's where I'm going with this pick. And last up, Seattle Seahawks. They're a difficult team to draft for. I kind of looked around at everything. I didn't feel the upside was there for a lot of these players other than at edge, which they don't need anymore for sure. Though I did still consider it heavily. I considered linebacker again, back-to-back linebackers here because I do like another one here that I won't say because I will probably do a third round at some point. So I looked around, I was like, okay, and I thought about wide receiver, but I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I like these guys. So I went with a swing again on the offensive line. I went with Logan Brown out of Kansas. Now, um, I think I'm the high man on Logan Brown, but I think he's a very explosive player with good size, and he just continues to win in true passing sets and in the run game. So if you ask him to just do his kick set and get out there and block, I think he does an excellent job there. And then I think in the run game, he is a solid performer. He is not an explosive player at the moment. I don't think he plays quite nasty enough to show that explosiveness at a high level, but he has it. And the Seahawks need a tackle to be able to be ready for Tyron who goes down all the time. So I think he's a great fit here. I think they would feel very happy about having this fall in their lap, in my opinion. Just seeing as they didn't have a ton of these second round picks to begin with, like I think they could have done it over Azrai Thomas, but Thomas is a day one contributor. They're looking for more of a long term guy here. Logan Brown, pick 64. I would take the bat, swing the bat on Logan Brown here, and feel very good about it. I considered interior as well, but tackle upside was too good here. So Logan Brown's the pick, and that wraps up our entire draft here. We'll scroll kind of backwards through so you can see everybody one last time. I will post this after this goes live. Obviously, things will change on me because I'm not doing this today. But yeah, that is the board as it stands. So let me know your thoughts. Tell me I'm an idiot for drafting somebody for your team that you'll never draft. How I know how it goes. I know how you guys are. Nobody's happy with their picks ever. I'm sure not. I'm gonna have it. Start talking to you with myself. Anyway, thanks for tuning in for this whole hour and 9 minutes of recording here. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. I think I'm gonna be talking about some offensive linemen next potentially. So who knows? Maybe defensive linemen. Peace.